A chance encounter. The crisp autumn air of Manhattan carried whispers of approaching winter as Keanu Reeves stepped out of his final press interview for the day. His shoulders sagged imperceptibly under the weight of exhaustion, the relentless questioning and bright studio lights having taken their toll. Despite the fatigue evident in the subtle creases of his once perfectly pressed black suit, his public persona hadn't wavered, a testament to decades of experience in the spotlight. Rather than calling for a private car or slipping into a waiting limousine, Keanu made a decision that would have surprised many of his fans. With a well-worn baseball cap pulled low over his eyes and his demeanor casual and unassuming, he blended seamlessly into the evening crowd heading for the subway. The underground station hummed with the energy of tired commuters eager to return home. Keanu stood, one hand gripping a cold metal pole as the subway car lurched into motion. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows across the faces of his fellow passengers. None seemed to recognize the celebrity in their midst, and Keanu was grateful for the anonymity. As the train rumbled through dark tunnels beneath the city, his mind drifted to thoughts of the day's interviews. John Wick 5 was generating considerable buzz, but the constant questions about his personal life had begun to wear thin. Sometimes, he longed for the simplicity of his early days in the industry, before every casual comment became headline fodder. The peaceful contemplation was interrupted by a soft sob from the far end of the car. Keanu's eyes shifted toward the sound, where two young girls, twins, by their identical features, huddled together on a worn plastic seat. They couldn't have been more than 12, their matching purple backpacks and scuffed sneakers suggesting they should have been home hours ago. What caught his attention wasn't just their obvious distress, but the way they kept glancing nervously at a man standing near the doors, his presence seeming to fill them with dread. Years of martial arts training and action movie experience had honed Keanu's instincts for danger. Something about the man's stance and the predatory way he watched the girls set off alarm bells. Without drawing attention to himself, Keanu shifted positions, moving closer to the twins while keeping the suspicious man in his peripheral vision. As the train approached the next station, the girls suddenly bolted for the doors. The man moved to follow, his intentions clear in the aggressive set of his shoulders. Keanu acted instinctively, timing his exit to place himself between the man and the fleeing children. "Excuse me," Keanu said quietly, his voice carrying an edge of steel beneath its usual gentle tone. The man startled, clearly not expecting interference. Their eyes met briefly, and something in Keanu's steady gaze made the stranger step back, melting into the crowd rather than risk confrontation. Outside the station, Keanu quickly spotted the twins huddled behind a newspaper stand. Their fear was palpable, but there was something else in their expressions, a weariness that no child should carry. "Hey," he said softly, maintaining a respectful distance. "Are you two okay?" The girls exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. The slightly taller one spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're fine. Thank you for what you did back there." "I'm Casey," she added after a moment's hesitation. "This is my sister Freya." Keanu noticed they wore no coats despite the autumn chill, and their clothes showed signs of wear that spoke of prolonged hardship. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. "It's getting late, someone must be worried about you." Freya's lower lip trembled. "Our mom, she's sick. We were trying to get some medicine, but that man." She trailed off, unable to continue. Casey squeezed her sister's hand. "We live under the bridge," she admitted, gesturing vaguely toward the East River. "Mom said not to tell anyone, but..." The pieces began falling into place in Keanu's mind. Their situation was far more serious than he'd initially realized. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked, noting their thin frames. Neither girl answered immediately, but their expressions told him everything he needed to know. "There's a McDonald's around the corner," he said. "Would you like to get something to eat? We can talk about how to help your mom." The twins hesitated, Years of stranger danger, warnings warring with desperate hunger and an instinctive trust in this kind-faced man who had already protected them once. Finally, Casey nodded. Okay. But we need to bring something back for Mom too. The McDonald's was nearly empty at this hour, the fluorescent lighting harsh against the windows that reflected the darkening city outside. Keanu watched as the girls devoured their meals, their initial hesitation giving way to ravenous hunger. He ordered extra food to take to their mother, his heart heavy with the realization that this might have been their first proper meal in days. As they ate, the story emerged in bits and pieces. Their mother, Laura, had once been a graphic designer before addiction and a series of unfortunate events left them homeless. Recently, she'd been trying to get clean, but her illness, which the girls described with worried uncertainty, made everything harder. They'd been living in an abandoned trailer beneath the Manhattan Bridge for the past 3 months. The man from the subway, they revealed, wasn't a stranger. He was connected to someone named Connie, who had been pressuring their mother to work for her. The implications made Keanu's blood run cold. "Would you trust me to help your mom?" he asked once they'd finished eating. "I have a friend who's a police officer. He specializes in helping people in difficult situations like yours." The twins shared another of their silent looks before Casey spoke. "Mom always says we shouldn't trust the police. She says they'll separate us." "I promise that won't happen," Keanu assured them. "My friend Robbie is different. He helps people stay together, get back on their feet. Will you at least let me meet your mom? Maybe we can figure something out together." After what felt like an eternity, they agreed to lead him to their makeshift home. The walk to the bridge was tense, all 3 of them watchful for any sign of the man from the subway or his associates. The trailer, when they reached it, was even more heartbreaking than Keanu had imagined, a battered remnant of someone's discarded vacation dreams, now serving as shelter for a desperate family. Laura was awake when they arrived, her gaunt face lined with worry that transformed into fear when she saw Keanu with her daughters. Despite her obvious illness, she positioned herself protectively in front of the girls. "Mom, it's okay," Freya said quickly. "He helped us. There was a man following us on the subway, one of Connie's men, but he stopped him." Recognition flickered in Laura's eyes as she took in Keanu's features, followed quickly by disbelief. But why would you?" "Because your daughters needed help," Keanu said simply. "And I think you do too." Over the next hour, as the girls dozed on their makeshift bed, Laura shared the full story. She'd been clean for 2 months, fighting her addiction with desperate determination for her daughter's sake. But Connie, a local trafficking ring leader, had other plans. She'd been pressuring Laura to work for her, using the girls as leverage. The man from the subway had been sent to deliver a message: time was running out. Keanu listened without judgment, his quiet presence encouraging Laura to continue even when her voice shook with shame or fear. When she finished, he pulled out his phone. "I'd like to call my friend now," he said gently. "He can help protect you from Connie and her people. There's a place, a villa I own upstate, where you and the girls can stay while you get back on your feet. Would you trust me that much?" Laura looked at her sleeping daughters, then back at Keanu. In his eyes, she saw not pity but genuine compassion, not judgment but understanding. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, tears sliding down her hollow cheeks. "For them, I'll trust you." As Keanu dialed Robbie's number, watching Laura stroke her daughter's hair with trembling fingers, he knew his life had changed irrevocably. Whatever came next, he was committed to helping this family find their way back to stability and safety. The night air carried the distant sound of sirens and city life, but inside the trailer, a fragile hope had begun to take root. Sometimes, Keanu reflected, the most important roles we play aren't the ones captured on camera, but the ones that unfold in life's quietest moments, when simply being human matters more than being a star. Safe harbor. Robbie arrived at the trailer within 30 minutes, his unmarked police car parking discreetly in the shadows. His years of experience handling trafficking cases were evident in his calm, professional demeanor as he interviewed Laura and documented the situation. The girls, now awake, watched the proceedings with wide, anxious eyes. "Connie's been on our radar for months," Robbie explained, his notebook filled with Laura's statement. "Your testimony could help us shut down her entire operation. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe." The plan came together quickly. While Robbie made arrangements with his task force to monitor the area for Connie's people, Keanu called Maria, his trusted villa keeper. Despite the late hour, she answered immediately, her Spanish-accented voice warm with concern as he explained the situation. "Of course, Mr. Reeves," she said without hesitation. "I'll prepare the guest house immediately. The poor dears must be exhausted." The journey to the villa took place in the pre-dawn hours, with Robbie's team providing discreet escort. Laura and the twins dozed in the back of Keanu's car, their few possessions packed in a single bag. The city lights faded behind them as they drove north, the urban sprawl giving way to rolling countryside. Maria was waiting at the villa gates when they arrived, her motherly presence immediately setting the girls at ease. The guest house, a comfortable two-story structure separate from the main villa, had been transformed into a welcoming haven. Fresh linens, warm blankets, and even a few stuffed animals awaited the twins in their room. "I hope you don't mind," Maria said softly to Keanu as they watched Laura settle the girls into bed. "I kept my granddaughter's old toys when they outgrew them. Children need something to hold on to when everything else is changing." The next few weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments, counseling sessions, and careful steps toward recovery. Laura, finally receiving proper treatment for both her addiction and her underlying health issues, began to regain her strength. The twins, enrolled in the local school under carefully guarded privacy, started to show glimpses of the carefree children they should have been. Keanu maintained his distance, not wanting to intrude on their healing process, but received regular updates from Maria. He smiled at stories of the girls discovering the villa's library, of Laura's tentative steps back into graphic design using the computer he'd provided, of small victories and quiet moments of joy. Then came the breakthrough in Robbie's case. "We've got her," Robbie announced during one of his weekly check-ins at the villa. Connie slipped up. One of her lower-level guys got caught in a routine traffic stop, started talking to save himself. "We're moving in tomorrow." The raid was successful, but the aftermath brought unexpected complications. As Connie's operation crumbled, her associates scattered, some seeking revenge against those they blamed for their downfall. Laura's testimony had been crucial, and despite the careful precautions taken to protect her identity, whispers began to circulate. The first warning came in the form of a suspicious car parked outside the villa gates. Then came the anonymous threats, delivered through untraceable emails to Laura's new design clients. Keanu increased security, but the tension was taking its toll on the family's fragile recovery. One evening, as autumn painted the villa grounds in shades of gold and crimson, Keanu found Laura sitting alone on the guest house porch, her thin fingers wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. "Maybe we should leave," she said without preamble. "Find somewhere else to start over. You've done so much already, and I can't bear the thought of bringing danger to your doorstep." Keanu settled into the chair beside her, considering his words carefully. "When I was younger," he began, "someone very wise told me that running from our fears only gives them more power. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is stand our ground and let others help us fight." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "The girls are finally happy here. Casey's joining the school science club, and Freya, yesterday I heard her laugh for the first time in months. Really laugh, like she used to before everything went wrong." "Then stay," Keanu said simply. "Let us help you build something permanent here. The guest house is yours for as long as you want it." "Why?" Laura asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why do all this for strangers?" Keanu was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. "Because 20 years ago, when I was struggling with my own demons, someone showed me kindness without asking for anything in return. They helped me remember who I was beneath the pain. Sometimes, that's all any of us need, a chance to remember our own worth." Their conversation was interrupted by the sounds of children's laughter. Casey and Freya were in the garden with Maria, helping her plant bulbs for spring flowers. The simple domesticity of the scene stood in stark contrast to their lives just months ago. "Okay," Laura said finally, her voice stronger. "We'll stay. But I want to help others like us. There must be more families out there, trapped like we were." Keanu nodded, an idea taking shape. "Actually, I've been thinking about that. What would you say to helping me set up a foundation? Something quiet, operating behind the scenes to help families escape trafficking and abuse? Your experience could help us understand what people really need." The spark of purpose that lit Laura's eyes was answer enough. As they began to discuss possibilities, neither noticed Maria watching from the garden, a knowing smile on her face. Sometimes, she reflected, the families we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into. But even as new plans took shape at the villa, darker forces were gathering. Connie's arrest had created a power vacuum in the trafficking world, and others were eager to fill it. Among them was a shadow from Laura's past, someone who had helped create the addiction that had nearly destroyed her life. And he had not forgotten about the woman who had escaped his influence, nor the twin girls who represented a loose end in his carefully woven web of control. The autumn days grew shorter, and with the approaching winter came a sense of foreboding. Despite the warmth and safety of the villa, despite the new life taking root, danger was circling ever closer. Soon, Keanu would face a choice between maintaining his cherished privacy and stepping into the light to protect the family he had unexpectedly found. The real battle was just beginning. Shadows of the past. The first snow of winter dusted the villa grounds in crystalline white, transforming the landscape into something from a fairy tale. Inside the guest house, Laura sat at her computer, finalizing the logo design for the new foundation. The past month had seen tremendous progress, not just in her recovery, but in the creation of something larger than herself. The Winter's Foundation, named not after her but after the season of new beginnings, would operate in the shadows just as Keanu did, providing safe houses and support networks for families escaping trafficking. Laura's designs captured this perfectly, subtle, strong, and hopeful. A knock at the door interrupted her work. It was Robbie, his expression grave despite his attempt at a reassuring smile. "We need to talk," he said quietly, glancing at the stairs to ensure the twins weren't within earshot. "There's been a development in the case." Laura's hands trembled as she saved her work. "Is it about Connie?" "No," Robbie replied, settling into a chair. "It's about Marcus Kane." The color drained from Laura's face at the name. Marcus Kane, the man who had first introduced her to the drugs that had nearly destroyed her life, the puppet master behind much of the city's trafficking operations. While Connie had been the visible threat, Kane had always been the shadow behind her power. "He's back in New York," Robbie continued. "And he's asking questions about Connie's old territories. More specifically, about you and the girls." Before Laura could respond, the sound of tires on gravel announced Keanu's arrival. He had been in the city for a series of interviews but had cut them short after receiving Robbie's urgent message. Seconds later, he strode into the guest house, his usual casual demeanor replaced by focused intensity. "Tell me everything," he said, taking in Laura's pale face and Robbie's serious expression. The story that emerged was more complex than any of them had imagined. Kane wasn't just another criminal, he was a sophisticated operator with connections in law enforcement, politics, and international business. He had used Laura's graphic design skills years ago to create perfect forgeries of documents for his trafficking victims, addicting her to ensure her cooperation. "He'll never stop," Laura whispered, her voice hollow. "He can't risk me testifying about what I know, about the forgery operation. And the girls, they saw things, back then. Before the drugs got bad." They might not remember now, but they will, Robbie finished grimly. Eventually, they'll remember enough to be dangerous to him. Keanu's expression hardened. Then we end this. Now. Before he gets anywhere near them. But Kane had already made his first move. That evening, as Maria prepared dinner in the main villa's kitchen, she noticed a sleek black car driving slowly past the gates. The driver's face was hidden, but her instincts, honed by years of protecting Keanu's privacy, told her something was wrong. She called Keanu immediately, then went to check on the girls. Casey and Freya were in the villa's library, safe and absorbed in their homework, but Maria's worry must have shown on her face because Casey looked up with sudden concern. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her young face too serious for her years. "No, mi amor," Maria assured her, but she moved to close the heavy curtains anyway. Just a chilly evening. That night, after the girls were asleep, the adults gathered in Keanu's study. The warm wood paneling and soft lamplight created an atmosphere of safety, but none of them felt secure. Laura paced as Robbie outlined what they knew about Kane's operations. "He's careful," Robbie explained, spreading photos across Keanu's desk. "Never gets his hands dirty directly. But he's connected to at least a dozen missing persons cases in the last year alone. We just can't prove it." "What about his business holdings?" Keanu asked, studying the surveillance photos. "Everyone has a weak point." "That's where it gets interesting," Robbie replied. "Most of his legitimate businesses are overseas, but he has one vulnerability, a private art gallery in Manhattan. It's where he meets clients, makes deals. And Laura's forgery work, a lot of it went through there." Laura stopped pacing. "The basement," she said suddenly. "There's a room in the basement where I used to work. If it hasn't been cleaned out. I kept copies of everything. Insurance, I called it when I was high. Proof of what he made me do." The implications were staggering. If Laura's copies still existed, they could provide the evidence needed to bring down Kane's entire operation. But getting to them would be nearly impossible. The gallery was a fortress, and Kane's security was legendary. "I could go," Laura suggested, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. "He might still think I'm an addict, desperate for a fix. If I played that right." "Absolutely not," Keanu and Robbie said simultaneously. "We need another way," Keanu continued. "One that doesn't put you at risk." As they debated options, Maria appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Reeves," she said urgently, "there's something you need to see." They followed her to the security room, where monitors showed every angle of the villa grounds. On one screen, a figure moved through the shadows near the perimeter fence. As they watched, two more appeared. "They're testing our defenses," Robbie said grimly. "This is just the beginning." Keanu's decision was immediate. "Maria, wake the girls. Everyone pack what you need, nothing more. We're moving to the safe house in the city tonight." As they hurried to prepare, Keanu made a series of calls. Within an hour, a helicopter landed on the villa's back lawn, its arrival masked by the wind and snow. The girls, still half asleep, held tight to Laura's hands as they boarded. Looking down at the villa growing smaller below them, Keanu knew they were crossing a point of no return. The time for hiding was over. To protect this family he had come to care for deeply, he would have to step into the light and confront Kane directly. But first, they needed those documents from the gallery basement. And for that, they would need a plan worthy of John Wick himself, minus the body count, but with all the precision and cunning his years in action films had taught him. As the helicopter turned toward Manhattan, Keanu began to formulate a strategy. Kane had no idea who he was dealing with, and that would be his ultimate downfall. The Gallery Gambit. The safe house was actually a penthouse in a building Keanu owned through a series of shell companies. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park, though the bulletproof glass and state-of-the-art security system were hidden beneath an appearance of luxury living. As dawn broke over the city, Keanu stood at these windows, watching the early morning light paint the skyline in shades of gold and rose. Behind him, Laura and the twins slept in one of the bedrooms, while Maria kept watch from the kitchen, preparing breakfast as if this were any normal morning. Robbie arrived just as the sun cleared the horizon, carrying a thick folder and a determined expression. "I've got something," he said without preamble, spreading documents across the dining table. "Kane's Gallery is hosting a private showing next week. Invitation only, very exclusive. The perfect cover for whatever deals he's making. And our perfect opportunity," Keanu mused, studying the gallery's floor plans. "Can you get us in?" "Better than that," Robbie grinned. "They're looking for additional security staff. High pay, no questions asked. The kind of job that attracts ex-military types who don't look too closely at their employer's business." A plan began to take shape. Keanu would use his connections to get himself added to the guest list, not as himself, but as a potential buyer represented by one of his investment companies. Robbie would go in as security, giving them eyes on both sides of the operation. The challenge would be reaching the basement while maintaining their cover. According to Laura's memory of the layout, the secure room where she had worked was accessed through a hidden door in Kane's private office. Getting there would require perfect timing and more than a little luck. As they discussed details, Casey appeared in the doorway, her young face serious. "We want to help," she said quietly, Freya nodding beside her. "We remember things about the gallery. Important things." Laura, who had woken at the sound of voices, moved to protest, but Casey continued with determination. "There's a service elevator," she said. "In the back, where they bring in the art. Mom used to take us through there when she had to work late. The guards don't watch it as carefully because it's old and noisy. They think no one would use it." Freya added, "And there's a pattern to the guard changes. We used to count the minutes between them when we were waiting for Mom. It helped pass the time." The adults exchanged glances, struck by the twins' resilience and observation skills. These children, who had survived so much, were offering crucial intelligence that could make the difference between success and failure. "Thank you," Keanu said gravely, treating their information with the seriousness it deserved. "But you understand you won't be anywhere near the gallery when this happens, right? Your job is to stay safe with Maria." The girls nodded, but there was a knowing look in their eyes that suggested they understood more than the adults realized. They had learned early that safety was often an illusion, and that sometimes the best protection was knowledge itself. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Keanu's team created an impeccable cover identity, complete with a history of art purchases and gallery appearances. Robbie worked his contacts to ensure his security position would give him access to the critical areas. Maria turned the penthouse into a command center, coordinating communications and escape routes. Laura struggled with feeling helpless, wanting to be more involved but knowing her presence would jeopardize everything. Instead, she focused on documenting everything she could remember about Kane's operation, creating detailed maps and lists that could help build a case against him. The night of the gallery showing arrived with a crystalline winter clarity. Keanu adjusted his bow tie in the penthouse mirror, the elegant tuxedo a stark contrast to his usual casual attire. Laura helped him with the final touches to his disguise, subtle makeup changes and a carefully styled wig that transformed him into someone altogether more forgettable. "Be careful," she whispered, her hands trembling slightly as she stepped back. "Kane, he sees things others miss. That's how he survived so long." Keanu caught her hands in his, squeezing gently. "We'll end this tonight," he promised. "By morning, you and the girls will be truly free." The gallery was housed in a converted brownstone, its historic facade belying the modern security systems hidden within. Keanu arrived fashionably late, playing the role of a distracted art collector to perfection. Robbie, nearly unrecognizable in his security uniform and carefully groomed beard, stood at attention near the main entrance. As Keanu circulated through the crowded main floor, he took careful note of the other guests. Art collectors mingled with business executives, while politicians chatted with celebrities, all of them potentially complicit in Kane's operations, whether they knew it or not. Kane himself made his entrance an hour into the event. He was younger than Keanu had expected, dressed in an impeccable suit that screamed old money. His smile never quite reached his eyes as he worked the room, shaking hands and making introductions. The plan was simple in theory: wait for Kane to be distracted by his hosting duties, then use the service elevator to access the basement while Robbie created a diversion upstairs. The reality, as always, proved more complicated. Keanu had just slipped away from a lengthy conversation about modern art when he spotted something that made his blood run cold. Through the gallery's front windows, he caught a glimpse of a familiar face, Casey, with Freya close behind, moving through the evening crowd outside. The twins had somehow followed them from the penthouse. Before he could react, Kane's voice cut through the ambient chatter. "Mr. Rivers," he said, using Keanu's cover name. "I've been hoping to discuss a particular piece with you. Something special, not currently on display." Keanu forced himself to remain calm, to smile and nod as Kane led him toward his office. Through his earpiece, he could hear Robbie's whispered curse as he too spotted the twins. Everything was unraveling, but they had to maintain their cover. The stakes were too high to fail now. What followed was the most intense hour of Keanu's life, playing the interested buyer while watching through the office windows as Robbie tried to intercept the twins without breaking his own cover. Kane seemed to sense something was off, his questions becoming more pointed, his observations more acute. Then, just as Keanu feared they would have to abort the mission, the twins provided an unexpected solution. A commotion erupted in the main gallery. Two young girls had apparently snuck in and were running through the crowds, causing chaos as they knocked over a display pedestal. Kane excused himself to deal with the situation, leaving Keanu alone in the office. It was the opportunity they needed, but at what cost? Through the open door, he could hear Kane ordering security to catch the girls, could see the twins ducking and weaving through the startled guests. With precious seconds ticking away, Keanu found the hidden door Laura had described and slipped into the basement. The secure room was exactly where she had said it would be, and her copies of Kane's documents were still there, hidden behind a loose panel just as she had left them years ago. As he photographed everything with a tiny camera, Keanu could hear the chaos continuing upstairs. Then, suddenly, silence fell. His earpiece crackled with Robbie's voice, tense but controlled. "The girls are safe. Maria has them. But Kane knows. He knows something's wrong." Keanu had just sealed the panel when he heard footsteps on the basement stairs. With no time to reach the service elevator, he pressed himself into the shadows behind a stack of crates. Kane's voice drifted down, carrying an edge of suspicion. "Search everything," he ordered. "Something's not right about this whole evening." The next few minutes were a masterclass in stealth as Keanu waited for his moment. When it came, a guard radio crackling with a false alarm from another floor, he moved. Years of action movie training combined with genuine martial arts skill allowed him to slip past the searching guards and up the service elevator. He emerged into a gallery in disarray, guests departing early, security personnel looking frazzled. Kane stood in the center of it all, his perfect composure finally cracking as he realized the true extent of what had happened. By the time Kane thought to check the secure room, Keanu was already gone, the evidence safely transmitted to Robbie's task force. The twins were back at the penthouse with Maria, and Laura's heart nearly stopped when she learned what they had done. But their reckless bravery had provided the perfect cover, and now, finally, they had everything they needed to bring Kane down. The question was, would they be able to use it before he realized exactly who had been in his gallery that night? The war wasn't over, but the final battle was about to begin. Dawn's Promise. The aftermath of the gallery operation unfolded with dizzying speed. Kane's carefully constructed world began to crumble as Robbie's task force moved on the evidence Keanu had recovered. International arrest warrants were issued, accounts were frozen, and years of trafficking operations were exposed to the light. But Kane himself had disappeared. In the penthouse, Laura alternated between fierce pride in her daughter's courage and terrifying fear for their safety. The twins, for their part, remained remarkably calm, as if their actions at the gallery had somehow helped them reclaim power over their own story. "We couldn't just hide anymore," Casey explained, curled up on the penthouse sofa between her sister and mother. "We needed to help end it." Keanu understood their motivation better than most. Sometimes, facing our fears head-on was the only way to truly overcome them. Still, the thought of how badly things could have gone haunted him. Security around the penthouse was doubled, then tripled when they received word that Kane had been spotted in the city. He was hunting them now, his reputation and empire in ruins, with nothing left to lose. The attack, when it came, was both unexpected and inevitable. Not against the penthouse, which Kane would have assumed was too well protected, but against the Foundation offices where Laura had been helping to set up support programs for other trafficking survivors. She had just finished a meeting with a potential donor when Kane's men struck. If it hadn't been for Maria's insistence on personal panic buttons for everyone, things might have ended very differently. As it was, Laura managed to trigger the alert and lock herself in a secure room before they reached her. Keanu and Robbie arrived with backup just as Kane himself appeared, his familiar smooth facade cracking to reveal the desperation beneath. The confrontation in the Foundation's lobby was brief but violent. "You've destroyed everything," Kane snarled, his gun trained on Keanu. "Years of work, millions in assets, all gone because you couldn't mind your own business." "No," Keanu replied calmly, aware of Robbie's team moving into position around them. "It's gone because you prey on the vulnerable. Because you destroy lives for profit. It ends today." The standoff lasted only moments before Kane made his final mistake. His attempt to shoot his way out was met with overwhelming force, and when the smoke cleared, he was in custody, his reign of terror finally over. Laura emerged from the secure room shaken but unharmed, and the sight of her walking into the twins' fierce embrace at the penthouse later that evening made all the risks worthwhile. The weeks that followed brought changes both large and small. Kane's trial became an international sensation, though Keanu's involvement remained secret thanks to careful management and strategic misdirection. The Winters Foundation grew, its work touching more lives than anyone had initially imagined possible. Laura's testimony, delivered with quiet strength, helped secure convictions not just against Kane but against dozens of his associates. The twins sat in the courtroom every day, holding their mother's hands, their presence a testament to the family's unbreakable bond. Spring arrived at the villa, bringing with it new beginnings. The guest house had become a true home, filled with laughter and the normal chaos of family life. Casey joined the school science team and won first place in the regional competition. Freya discovered a talent for painting, her work capturing the beauty of the villa grounds in vibrant colors. One evening, as cherry blossoms drifted on the warm breeze, Keanu found Laura sitting on the porch swing, watching her daughters plant a vegetable garden with Maria. "Thank you," she said softly as he settled beside her. "Not just for saving us, but for showing us how to save ourselves." Keanu smiled, remembering their first meeting in that battered trailer under the bridge. "You did the hard part," he replied. "You kept fighting for them, even when it seemed impossible." "We're thinking of expanding the Foundation's work," Laura continued, her eyes bright with purpose. "Setting up more safe houses, creating job training programs. There are so many others out there who need what we can offer." The sound of the twins' laughter drifted across the garden as Maria showed them how to properly space tomato plants. It was a sound of healing, of hope, of futures reclaimed from darkness. "I'd like to help," Keanu said simply. "Whatever you need." As the sun set behind the villa, painting the sky in brilliant hues, Keanu reflected on the strange paths that had led them all here. Sometimes the most meaningful roles we play aren't the ones that bring fame or recognition, but the ones that allow us to make a real difference in the lives of others. The twins ran up to show them the first sprouts in their garden, their excitement contagious. Laura's smile, watching them, held none of the shadows that had once haunted her. They were all healing, all growing, all moving forward together. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all, not just surviving, but learning to truly live again. The past couldn't be erased, but it could be transformed into something meaningful, something that helped others find their way out of darkness. As the family gathered for dinner that evening, their conversation filled with plans and dreams for the future, Keanu knew he had found something rare and precious, a chance to use his resources and influence not just to protect one family, but to create lasting change for many others. The silent guardian had become part of something larger than himself, and in doing so, had helped write a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of chosen family. It was, he reflected as he watched the twins teach Maria a complicated handshake they'd invented, the most important role he would ever play.